Let's go. So, welcome to this session on enterprise development with Power Automate and Dr. Flow. First, I would like to thank the organizer, in the first place, but also the sponsors. There are many sponsors today, and without the sponsor, we would not be able to organize this event. So, thank you again. Um, so, in this session, I would like to share my experience of 15 Power Platform Enterprise project. And I'm Dr. Flo. I'm also known as Serge Luca. I'm a business application and Power Platform MVP. I'm MVP for the 14th year. I work on the business platform, business application, but also Office 365. So I'm a solution architect. I'm based in Brussels, in Belgium. And I've created a company called Power Platform Associate with another MVP, specialized in Power BI, Isabel van Kampenhout. So we at Power Platform Associate, we have a concept called Power Platform Factory 2020, where we take the different problems that come up when you want to use a Power Platform. And that means we need to be able to focus on Power Platform IT governance and strategy. That's very important. Power Platform tenant administration, Power Platform learning, adoption, security, and enterprise architecture. Regarding enterprise architecture, there are many topics, but today I will talk a bit more about one of them, which is the BPM, Business Process Management. This is the menu of the day. So first, we need to keep it simple, yes, but not all the time. You need to know the limitation, so keep the limitation of the product in mind. I will describe 3+1 patterns, a case study, and a tool that I did create, which is the BPM Toolkit, which is open source, fully written with the Power Platform, that overcome the problem that I will describe right away. So with the Power Platform, you can quickly create application. You can quickly create prototype application, and the business like that because they can see something quite quickly. And sometimes the prototype survive. Okay, so you can quickly create, I would call that Kleenex application, and sometimes the Kleenex application survive. However, if the application keep growing, you need to organize it. And in the past, during the last decades, we have defined, well, the industry has defined a lot of best practices that you'll have to follow. Of course, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate. Don't over-engineering your application. However, you will quickly have to organize your application in layers. So the industry provide a recommendation where your application must be structured in at least 3 layers. So the data access layer, the business layer, the presentation layer. And in this layer, you'll have, for instance, in the presentation layer, Power Apps, Teams, SharePoint Forms, Microsoft Forms, even bots. In the business layer, that's going to be Flow. And the data access layer is going to be flows. So child flow called by the business layer. And of course, at the bottom, you have your data storage. So SharePoint, Common Data Service, Oracle, and so on. However, I usually define additional layers like an analytics layer. So if you need some analytics or reports, then you need to create an analytics layer. So that's basically Power BI reports, and also a logging layer. So your application need to be able to provide some kind of telemetry, okay? And that's why we need a logging layer. And usually I use Azure Application Insight. And the communication between all this layer is the following. So the presentation layer will talk to the business layer, which will talk to the data access layer, which will access the data storage. The data storage will return information back to the data access layer, to the business layer, and so on to the presentation layer. It's perfectly okay if the presentation layer directly talk to the backend storage. Also, the analytics layer will directly communicate in read mode with the backend storage. And all layers, so presentation layer, business layer, and data access layer, will communicate with the logging layer to provide some telemetry information. Um, to be honest, usually you need an additional layer, which is security layer. So it all depends on the application complexity. I will show you an example, but sometimes accessing the data can be complicated in terms of security. It's not straightforward, so you need to put that in your application. Okay, so whatever the platform you use, you need to know the limitation because there are always limitations. There are limitations in the Power Platform, including in the Power Automate. We still have the good old limitation, which is a flow duration is 30 days. So after 30 days, a flow stop running. So there's no workaround. Well, there are workaround, there are patterns. But the workaround or the pattern I'm going to recommend right now is to use the framework or the tool that I will present at the end, which is the BPM Toolkit, which is free. Flow approval duration is 30 days, not exactly, because if you create an approval from one flow and you wait for this approval from the same flow, then yes, it's 30 days because one flow cannot run for more than 30 days. But you can have a flow that create an approval and another flow that listen to an approval because approval are stored in the common data service. So there is a trigger, which is the trigger when a record is updated, which is premium. So that requires some premium licensing. So what I do now is I use the BPM toolkit. In the past, I had defined a pattern called the controller pattern, which allow you to go beyond 30 days. But now I have something better that you will see. There's no state machine. That is very important because state machine means your flow need to be able to work to go forward, backward, to be redirected to any step, right? So we don't have that in Power Automate. And so that's why I did create the BPM toolkit, is to provide a way to use state machine with Power Automate in flows. Also, the application lifecycle management story in Power Platform is still a bit too complicated. There are tools. So we have the Azure DevOps tool that can be used with the Power Platform. These tools work very well when you use the Common Data Service, so CDS, but not when you use SharePoint, right? Not when you use SharePoint. It's more complex with SharePoint. We have SharePoint GUID, we have SharePoint list URL. This need to be changed. So it's not taken over by the DevOps tool. And I did create a tool that actually will be part of the BPM toolkit, but you can use it right away. To take a look at that, just watch the following video from my YouTube channel, environment variable and SharePoint flow, yes and no. So you will see the tool that I did create that can deploy your flow from one environment to the others and will update all the GUID. Also, you cannot resume a flow. So if a flow stopped for any reason, you cannot restart the flow from where it stopped. Okay, so there's no workaround at the moment. Also, there is an API call limitation. So when your flow call a connector, there is a limitation, right? This is quite new. 500 call per 5 minutes per user, plus there is a limitation per 24 hours. It all depends on the license. If you have Office 365 license, it's 2,000 calls per user per 24 hours. However, you can buy capacity add-on. So you don't have to buy premium license. You can buy capacity add-on on top of your Office 365 license. There's no custom task form. So if we ask someone to approve something, we have basic, very, very basic form to primitive form. The workaround is you can create adaptive cards, but that's very limited, or you can use the BPM toolkit, as I will show you. There's no task delegation. So if someone get an approval request, and if this guy is in holidays or is sick or in vacation or somewhere, I mean, you cannot delegate that to someone else automatically, right? So we need something, and that's what I've put in the BPM toolkit. So now let's take a look at three important patterns. So the first one is elevation of privilege. If you have Alex call a Power Apps application, and the Power Apps application call a flow to do something special. And the flow is created with the Flow Maker account. And the flow access SharePoint. Who will access SharePoint? Actually, Alex will access SharePoint, not the Flow Maker account. That's very important because if your flow need more privilege than what Alex can do, you are stuck, right? So you need to find a workaround, which is quite easy. The workaround is that your flow can call a child flow because we have an action called run a child flow. And this child flow, well, this flow call another flow, which is created with the flow maker account. And the child flow that you call run with elevated privilege. It run with the flow maker account. That's where you can do more advanced stuff. Okay, I use this pattern all the time. So for instance, this child flow can call SharePoint. That means it's not Alex that will call SharePoint, but the flow maker account with elevated privilege. And this flow can, for instance, access premium features. And that means that you don't have to buy one premium license for every user, but you can buy one license for the whole company. We call that the per flow license, right? 480 euros. That covers the whole companies. So that's very interesting. So when I have a flow that call another flow, I call that a proxy flow, just for terminology. One advice, when you have a flow that call another flow, there's no traceability. That means that the second flow run with elevated privilege. So in terms of, in terms of compliance, that's an issue, right? So my recommendation is to pass the current user as a parameter to the child flow all the time, so that it can be traced. So audit is important. The second pattern is secure record pattern. What is that? Well, when you have to deal with security, this is how I work. I create a blank record. So I have a flow that creates a blank record, and then I secure the blank record, and then I fill in the blank record, right? So I never create a record, put information, and then secure it. No, it must be blank and then secure. Example, this flow does that. So it's a flow that uses SharePoint to manage security. So here, in this part, I create a blank record in my SharePoint list. Then I secure the record, and managing security can be complicated. You can have a mixture of group and people, and that can be complex. And then you update the blank record with real information. So that's an important security pattern that I recommend. Third pattern is a generic way to submit information. For one of my customers, I have 50 forms, Power Apps form to create, and this form need to call flows and submit information. So I wanted to make that generic. So this is in the Power Apps. So in the Power Apps here, I have a complex structure, global variable with many, many fields used by the form. And then these Power Apps call a flow. Actually, it's called two flow, one for the data and one for the attachment. And when I call the flow, I use the JSON Power Apps function that take your whole global variable, Power Apps global variable, and pass it to the flow in JSON. Okay? So in the flow that you call by Power Apps, you get the JSON information here, right here, and you pass that to the child flow. So you pass the JSON information here. And now I'm gonna show you the child flow. So this one here. In the child flow, you can use a part JSON information, and you can parse the information, and then you can use dynamic properties in your flow. Okay, so you can make things very generic and reusable. You want more pattern? Just watch my YouTube video, my YouTube channels. You'll find more pattern. Let me illustrate a case study, which is that I have a customer who want to re-implement its HR system, and there are 60 type of HR requests, 7 type of workflow, and the workflow can take 10 steps. 7 type of workflow, HR workflows. The whole approval process can take up to 1 year, because when someone make an HR request, then sometime they need to get to the administration to find the paper, something like that. They need to submit the paper. So it can take up to 1 year for the whole process. So we are far beyond the 30 days limitation of Power Automate. Also, supervisor and user want to see the next step and the previous step. They want a graphical way. They want a graphical visualization of the whole process. We don't have that in Power Automate. So they want to see a dashboard of every business process. They want KPI as well. So, and the workflow, the logic is the following, for instance. You make a leave request for medical reason for an employee in Paris. It must be validated by a doctor. And then the legal department need to check if it's a right or just a possibility. It must be validated by a line manager. and then validated by the first line support HR in Paris, and then by supervisor HR in Paris, and then by supervisor HR in Brussels, and then by director in Brussels, and then invalidated, right? So it's complex. Also, you may have to get back to previous state. You see the arrow here, you may have to go back to previous state. So we cannot do that with Power Automate. That's the bad news. So, but still, you want to use Power Automate, you want to use Power Apps because you like this ecosystem. It's easy. Well, I was in this situation, and that's the reason why I did create the BPM toolkit. I have to create that. So let's take a look at the BPM toolkit, Business Process Management Toolkit, which is open source. Okay, I will share the code, the source code. So this is not marketing. I mean, it's really for you. Well, the goal of this toolkit, well, the facts are the following. It must be, and actually it is, written 100% with the Power Platform, mostly with Power Automate, but also with Power Apps. Okay, source code is available. It's free, it's open source. I've implemented state machine. I will illustrate that. You have task delegation. If someone does not answer the approval, I mean, there's no bottleneck anymore in the business process. There's no workflow duration limit. We are not stuck to 30 days. There's no limitation, zero limitation, zero. I mean, your workflow can take 10 years if you want. It's visual. People need to be able to see the whole business process in a graphical way. The workflow can change at runtime. If you want, the workflow started, and at some moment, a supervisor wants to add a new person, a new approver in the chain, we can do that. The workflow can be changed at runtime. We cannot do that with Power Automate. We have custom task form. We can define our own custom task form. You can put whatever you want by using Power Apps, not just adaptive card. There is a pipeline security. I will get back to this because that's a bit complicated. Security is something very interesting topic, and it can be complicated. Also, the business should be able to create workflow and to modify the workflow. That's important. Most people in the business, in HR, cannot use Power Automate, especially when there are complex workflow. I mean, that's for citizen developer, not business, or for developers. Also, RPA integration, robotic process automation. Sometimes we want the workflow running on the server to be able to run a legacy application running on the desktop or running on the web. So there is a RPA integration in BPM Toolkit. And last but not least, you don't need to buy premium license because this also works on top of SharePoint. It's free, baby. Yeah, it's free. Well, let's take a look at BPM Toolkit. So this is a SharePoint site. It's a development site that illustrates the HR service. I don't have any real demo because my BPM Toolkit is under supervision, under maintenance. The DFS server is down, so I have screenshot. I don't like screenshot, but anyway, I was forced to use screenshot. So we have three area here. We have the HR area. So HR want to be able to see the whole business process and interact with the business process. I will show you what's behind this. Here, this is dashboard. Anyone in the company has a dashboard. People should be able to submit requests and to approve requests. So they have a dashboard. This is only for HR. This is for anyone. And here, this is illustration of one HR request. We have 50 HR requests. This is only one, the most complex one, part-time request. So this is the part-time request. This is Power Automate. This is Power Apps. Okay, it's a custom application, so it's not part of BPM Toolkit. It's just to illustrate how the process work. A user wants to submit a part-time request. Okay, he start Power Apps. This also work in the phone, and he can just fill in the form. It's a wizard. I like wizard that make UI simpler, right? That's a reason for my part-time. Okay, select the date and time. Okay, right? Summary page. And then people can save the draft, and then it's safe and secure, or they can go to the approval process. If they go to the approval process, they get this window. For each type of request, there is a dedicated workflow with different type of approvers, different roles. However, if needed, we can add additional people in the workflow here dynamically, right? So you can add as many as you want. So you click on launch the workflow, okay, and it's store, well, it's submitted, it's stored somewhere, and then the BPM toolkit will start. So people get this, they can go to the dashboard. So if they go to the dashboard, because they've just submitted a request, they get this. This is dashboard. Very different than the approval center of Power Automate, right? So it's generic. It runs for any type of request. You can use that for finance, for whatever you want. So here, user can follow their request. You see, each row is a request. It's a part-time that you did submit. And what is very important here is that you can graphical way follow the request. So at the moment, the request is stuck on HR support. It's in orange here. But when HR support will accept this, it will go to this guy and this guy and this guy, etc. Okay, you can interact with this. You can visualize, you can edit, you can cancel the request. Look here, you have a menu here. You have my task, my delegation. If you go to my delegation, you can say, anytime I get a task, I want the task to be delegated to this guy. So if someone submit a workflow and the workflow is an approval for you, the workflow will automatically redirect that to the other person. And if the other person also did a redirection, it will work as well. We can go up to 3 levels. Okay, so no bottleneck anymore. And the next thing is this. This is for HR, not for any users. This is for HR. That's the workflow center. In the workflow center, supervisor, so only supervisor, can have a view of all business process in a graphical way. So each line here is a request. So here I have only part-time, but you can have many type of requests. So we can follow that. We have filters, we have KPIs. If you click on approved, we will see all the requests that have been approved, well, completed and approved. So at the moment, by default, we are on orange. So that means we just want to see the waiting request. So for instance, here we have different requests. You can see depending on the color, this one is green, that means it has been approved and it went to this guy. So we can search, okay, across the different process. And if as a HR officer, because only HR officer can see this, you click on this. So if you click on this, you will see the request. If you click on this, you will go to the following dashboard. You will be able, as an officer, to interact with the business process. So you see, we are here. This is green. So this group of people did approve, and then the system moved to this guy. That means this guy, so there is a task pending for this guy. So let's get back to this guy dashboard. This is my dashboard. And indeed, I have a pending request, right? If I click here, I can visualize a request. This is my form. So that's custom form. Yeah, we have custom form. I told you. And I can click on, for instance, I accept, and then I get a confirmation here. I click confirm. Yes, you can put a comment. And then that means you accept it. So HR on the other side will see that the workflow, that this guy did accept. So this is green. There is even a comment here. You see there is a picture for a comment. And the workflow moved to the next step director. And here I can do different things. I can, for instance, I can say, hey, I want to redirect to step 0 for any reason. I want to get back. So you just click here, put step 0, click confirm, and the system get back here. So we have state machine. We have state machine, right? So we can do different things. For instance, let's get back here. You can say, hey, I want to reassign this task. You can reassign to another user. Or you can say at runtime, oh, I would like to put a new guy in the pipeline. So you can say insert a new step and just specify who's going to be the actor, and you will see a new step will show up at runtime, even though the workflow is running live. You cannot do that with Power Automate, even though this is written with Power Automate. We don't use Power Automate approval. We have our own custom approval. Okay. So I mentioned that the business can create its own workflows and can change a workflow. I have the concept of meta workflow. So in a SharePoint list, I can create a workflow like this. My workflow for leave requests will follow the following logic. Step 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We go to this group of people. We go to this guy, this group of people, this group of people. We can even put a workflow as a step. You can have workflow that generate document on the fly. You can even put this. You can say if status of this action is negative, then I want to go there. Then this is step 6. So the system will automatically go to different part of your workflow. So that's state machine. You see? So all the missing part of Power Automate are available in the toolkit. What's the architecture behind this thing? Well, I've implemented a pattern that I've called the case management pattern. So this is the BPM toolkit in gray. And let's say here, out of the toolkit, you create your own custom request. And the idea is, if you use SharePoint, there is a SharePoint list for each type of request. So your request is going to be stored here. And then for each request, the request will be sent into the BPM toolkit. In the toolkit, we have a generic list called cases. So the request become a case. There is a case lifecycle. So a system will generate steps in this list here. That's why you have steps, visible steps. We have a step generator, if you want. That's how it works. So another request from a case, and we have step generated in this list, etc. Right? So that's a case management pattern that I've used in other projects as well. But I push that to the limit. There is a data model in the BPM toolkit. So for instance, here you create your requests that are not in the toolkit, and your requests become case. There is a case list, go to the case lifecycle, etc. There are other lists like meta workflows, roles, etc. Okay. So there are other modules. What are the modules in this toolkit? Well, first, the toolkit at the moment works with SharePoint because I want it to be free. But I will provide an implementation on top of the Common Data Service. At the moment, I've used Power Automate. I could have used Logic Apps. This is the core part of the toolkit. There are different sub-modules. So we have proxy flow, we have security module, task manager, workflow optimizer, workflow generator, case launcher, analytics, runtime module. What is the optimizer? Let's say for one reason, you have the same person is in the workflow for different reason. I mean, you can optimize that. 2 person become only 1 person. That's the same. I mean, we can optimize a workflow. So that's why we have a workflow optimizer. At the moment, the implementation is only SharePoint, but I will provide the CDS access layer. Okay, so that's for the core. On top of that, we have the UI, and in the UI, we have process dashboard. That's the one I've shown you before. Task form, and of course, you can create your own custom request form or custom task form if you want. So your custom thing can easily be plugged into the BPM toolkit. And what about the code? I mean, code, well, I mentioned before, is 100% a Power Platform. Basically, I have, I think, 51 flows and 4 Power Apps Canva, right? So this is the list of flows. Let me show you the code a little bit. So I have an environment BPM toolkit with one solution. And here, these are my flows. Okay, so these are my flows, as you can see. Example, I've create case. As you can see, if you remember, one of the first pattern I show is create case proxy that call create case. So I use that often. So delegation proxy call delegation. Security model is very important. Yeah, what about security? Security is very important and complicated because let's say you ask different service to approve, different roles. It's not just people, it's a group of people, roles. That means when you store this information in the SharePoint list, you need to have unique permission. Okay, so the system needs to know exactly who can access what. And if dynamically you add a new role or a new person in the approver, so when the workflow is still running, you need to change the security as well. Okay, so the whole pipeline is completely secure. If you remove someone, you can remove security as well. So security is very complicated. It's very important when you deal with HR information. That's probably the most secure information. That's HR information. Okay, so security is really at the core of this BPM toolkit. So that's why I've secure case, secure step, okay, secure case, call secure step, etc. So that's very, very, very sensitive, this kind of thing. Also, I have the Power Apps application here, down below. So for instance, the control center is this thing. Let's edit that. So that's for real. I mean, it's a real product, right? It's not just a screenshot. So loading. So it's a Power Apps Canva application that, of course, call many flow. So all the interaction between the Power Apps and the backend is done by calling flow. So I use flow as a microservice. I could have used .NET, but using flow was much faster to implement. So for me, flow is really make you really productive. Yeah, it's a bit slow. The environment is a bit slow today, but here we go. Yeah, it will show up. Yeah, slowly. Okay, so as you can see, it's for real. Yeah, I need to authenticate. Okay, so it's a Canva application calling flow. So basically, I've bypassed most Power Automate limitation that I mentioned before. There is only one, which is if a flow stop at some point, I cannot restart it from where it stopped. So this is something that I did not fix. Otherwise, all the limitation that I mentioned have been bypassed. Okay, so of course here, as you can see, the application call flows. Okay, but I don't want to make that too boring for you. Nice picture, right? So voila, and I will probably ship that toolkit, that framework. So it's a framework and a tool next month. So in November. So I promise to share that in November in GitHub. Okay. So I hope that you will enjoy it, or also that this tool will give you some ideas, because code will be available. If you want, you can take it and create your own fork if you want. Okay. So thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed this session. So bedankt and merci. We have, I think, time for question, right? So we still have 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's still some time. Yeah, absolutely, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a problem.
Okay. Did you see any question or?
Let me double check.
I
There
will
were
check
when I.
here. Oh yes.
Yeah, one from Matthias Fontaine. Do users have to use the exact phrasing as in the trigger phrases, or is there any automatic interpretation?
I don't see the question. Could you say again? I don't see it.
The question in the chat from
Yeah.
Matthias Fontaine was good idea to split the content from the user interface, allow
Yes.
to use multiple user interfaces to link to the same content. And then the actual question was, do users have to use the exact phrasing as in the trigger phrase, or is
No,
there an
no.
automatic interpretation?
It's no. It's an interpretation, of course. Yeah. You don't have to use that. Yeah.
Okay, but apparently I was reading the wrong question. Huh.
Okay.
Sorry to.
I've seen. Yeah. There are many questions. SharePoint permission, flow permission, power-ups. Assuming in that case, SharePoint Online can use the data storage. Yeah, which permission do you manage with the config list? The flow permission, the config list. So basically, in this implementation, I use SharePoint permission, right? So I use SharePoint unique permission. So basically, the idea is the following: when someone creates a case, a request, the request become a case to be generic. The case is stored in SharePoint list and directly must be highly secured. So I use unique permission. So I use SharePoint unique permission. And I keep this permission until the whole business process complete. When the business process complete, because as you know, there are limitations in the number of unique permission in SharePoint, I take the whole information and I store that in another data storage, which in this case is the common data service. But during the whole approval process, people must be able to use SharePoint because these people don't have any premium license. That's why I keep that in SharePoint. And of course, information can stay in SharePoint for up to 1 year.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question. Yes.
Yep. One of the first questions was, did I get it right that a flow can't run for more than 30 days?
That is correct. So a flow cannot run for more than 30 days. It was like this since the early beginning of Flow, of Power Automate. That was a real issue. And that's why I don't use the Power Automate approval anymore. I use my own custom approval. So that's really an issue. So anytime you want to deal with business process management, indeed, that's going to be a problem. Yes. Yes, indeed.
I see that Rick de Koning answered already a few of the questions.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Rick. Do you need a premium licensing to use solution? No, you don't need premium license if you want to use child flow in solution. That's part of your Office 365 license. Yeah. So yeah, that's correct. Rick answer. Thank you, Rick, again. And Ingrid, I've done some tests with solution feature. It's all I've struggled as the flow can be triggered from the SPO GUID. The SharePoint, yeah, that's correct, indeed. So indeed, if you put your flow in a solution, you cannot, so the SharePoint cannot directly trigger the flow. So you need to call a flow that will call a child flow. Okay, so you can do that indirectly. Yes. But that's the pattern. Again, always call a flow that call a child flow. Okay. Did you already implement? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Christophe, did you already implement it at customers? I'm currently implementing that for a customer, a big multinational company. Yes.
There's a question about permissions. Which permissions do you manage with the configuration list? The flow permissions. Also a question from Ingrid.
Yes. So I use the SharePoint. Yeah. So the security model is the following. Somewhere in the SharePoint list, I define roles. That's for HR. And I define groups. So each type of request, there is a dedicated SharePoint group, so that only people of this group can see the request and other approvers, of course. Also, for my customer, HR is not HR. They are specialists. Some people from HR can see some type of request. Other people from HR can see other type of requests because some HR requests are very sensitive. So basically, to answer the question, I use a mixture of SharePoint group. I use SharePoint group permission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there was finally a question from Rick himself. You said you bypassed almost all Power Automate licensing limitations except for resuming, but how can you bypass the action call limit?
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I do not bypass the action call limit because the action call limit is baked in the product. So if my customer need more action call limit, they can buy capacity add-on. So they don't have to buy premium license. They just have to buy capacity add-on. They're not very expensive. My current customer, the one that where I implement this BPM toolkit, does not have any premium license. So they have to use SharePoint, and they cannot afford premium license for 6,000 people. So, but they're gonna buy a capacity add-on license, which is something that should cost something like 1,000 euros per month. I mean, which is nothing for this kind of company.
Yep.
Yes.
From Chirag Patel.
Chirag,
For security permission aspects in the BPM toolkit, do you use HTTP connector to access the Microsoft Graph API?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't use the Microsoft Graph API. So the because if for any reason a workflow need to access the Graph API, which is not the case at the moment, everything is standard, you might just create a workflow which is called by the BPM toolkit, and this workflow need a premium license. That means if you buy the per flow license, which is $500 per month, the whole company is covered up to 5 flow. But at the moment, I'm not accessing the Graph API. I don't need it. Okay.
Right.
But again, if you need, you don't have to buy premium license for every user. It's just one license for the whole company, the per flow license.
And Rick has another question. Doesn't that count as multiplexing?
Yeah, good question, Rick. Now, if you buy the per flow license, that means that the whole company is covered up to 5 flow, premium flow, a limited number of users. It's not multiplexing. If you buy one user license for the system account, that is multiplexing. So that's not legally authorized, right? So, but buying the per flow cover the whole company. I think people should learn a bit more about the per flow licensing because it's a bargain. If you can put your premium features in the flow and not in the power apps, then you can use the per flow license and you just buy 500. You have to pay $500 per month. Yes, Rick. So I think we reach.
I think we're almost the last question.
Yes.
I see Ingrid is still typing. I'm not sure if it's a question, of course. We'll see. We still have 1 minute, so.
Still have 1 minute, yeah. I don't understand the call a child flow pattern. Yes. So yes, Ingrid. So if a flow need to call another flow, it need to be in a solution. Yes. So if I think the question is related to the SharePoint flow. So the SharePoint flow cannot today at the moment cannot call a child flow because it's in the SharePoint flow is not in the solution. This will change in the coming weeks normally. However, what you can do is indirectly. So you just put an information somewhere in a SharePoint list that trigger the child flow. That's how it works at the moment. Yeah, if you need that. So you are right, Ingrid. Huh? So SharePoint flow cannot call directly a child flow. You have to do that indirectly.
Okay, perfect.
Ingrid?
I think that those were all the questions, and I think we'll leave you some time to breathe now after an exhausting session. Right? It's always hard. 45 minutes.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Yeah, great for having you at our event again for the, I don't know how many times you already
How
spoke
many
at our
times?
event.
Yes,
So yeah,
I
yeah,
feel I feel home here.
yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, really now at home.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. For the attendees and also for Serge, of course, we're having a closing at 17:15. So if you want to hang around, stick around for the closing and for the raffle for the prizes, because of course we don't have an event without prizes. Please stick around for just another 15 minutes. All right. Thank you, everyone, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for the wonderful session.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thomas.
Bye.
Bye.
The Omita framework is an enterprise-ready software platform that makes it possible to set up an easy integration between your existing back-office applications and push all the relevant information into digital workplaces. Omita has developed various kinds of solutions which can be easily deployed and linked to your back-office applications. Omita has solutions for contract management, HR to speed up onboarding and offboarding processes, sales dashboards, shop floor portals, and many more. If you want more information, visit our website.